Hi class, Mrs. Calvi here. Quick review on calculating simple interest. So you should know that the I in the formula, first of all, the formula is I is equal to PRT. I stands for the simple interest, and this here it tells you is the money paid only on the principal. So the principal is the amount of money borrowed or invested. So let's just pretend you're borrowing money from the bank, okay? So the principal is the amount you borrowed from the bank. The rate of interest is the percent that the bank is going to charge you on the money they're lending you or that you're borrowing. And the time is the amount of years the money is being borrowed for, okay? So remember, interest, simple interest, the formula is I is equal to PRT. Now we can rearrange this formula if, let's say, if you were solving and they were asking for the simple interest, you would want it in this form. You want the simple interest by itself. But let's say they wanted you to find what the principal was. So we would rearrange this formula so the P, principal, was by itself. And this is how you would do that. So think about when we were solving equations. So if I want the P by itself, think about what do I want to get rid of here? Well, I want to get rid of the R and the T because I want the P by itself. Well, all of these variables are next to each other, so that means multiplication. In order to get rid of them, we need to do the opposite, which is division. So I'm going to divide both sides by what I want to get rid of. I want to get rid of the R and the T. Whatever I do to one side of the equal sign, I must do to the other side of the equal sign. Okay? So now the R and the T here cancel out. And my new formula is P is equal to I over RT. So now if you were solving a problem and it said to calculate what the principal was, you would want to use this formula. If they're asking you to solve for the principal, that means they're giving you the simple interest amount, they're giving you the rate, and they're giving you for the amount of time that the money was either borrowed or invested, okay? Now, let's say they said, well, calculate what the rate is. So all you would do is, again, you are going to rearrange the formula. The original formula is I is equal to PRT. And let's say the problem says calculate the rate. They give you all of the information, but you need to know what the rate is. So you want the R by itself. So what are we going to get rid of? What is with the R that we want to get rid of? Well, the P and the T are with the R. So I'm going to divide both sides by PT. The P and the T cancel, and we have our R by itself. The rate is equal to the simple interest over the principal times the time. Now, they would give you all of this information. You would plug in the numbers and then solve for your rate. Okay? And you can do the same thing for time. You can get the T by itself by dividing both sides by PR, and then it would be T is equal to interest over principal times rate. Okay, so that's the first thing you need to know. You can take this formula and you can rearrange it so you are able to solve whatever problem that they're asking you for. All right, simple interest is actually kind of easy. So let me go over an example here. Okay, so here we have a problem. It says Tristan borrowed $14,500 from his brother and promised to pay him back over 5 years at an annual simple interest rate of 7%. How much interest will he pay if he pays off the entire loan at the end of the 5th year? And then what is the total amount he will repay? Okay, so remember, we talked about the amount borrowed, that's the principal amount, right? There's two questions here. They're first asking how much will he pay if he pays off the entire loan? How much interest will he pay? So we're going to solve for I here, okay? So we're going to plug in the rest of the information. They told us that the principal, that's the amount he borrowed, that was $14,500, right? $14,500. He is, there's a simple interest rate of 7%. You always want to put this in decimal form. So going from a percent to a decimal, there would have been a separate video on this. So if I had 7%, I'm going to take the percent sign and I'm going to go 2 places to the left. And I'm going to add a decimal point. So 7% is equivalent to 0.07. So you always want to put the interest rate in decimal form, okay? So let me just erase that really quick. Okay, so the interest rate is 7%, which we just said was 0.07. And the amount of time he is borrowing it over a 5-year time period. Now, all you're doing is multiplying these together. You're taking the 14,500, multiplying it by 0.07 times 5. Now, when you do that calculation, you would get your interest totaling $5,075. So that answers the first question. How much interest will he pay if he pays it off in 5 years? He's going to pay $5,075 in interest. The second part of the question says, what is the total amount he will pay? So interest is money that you have to pay on top of what you borrowed. So he originally borrowed $14,500. And he has to pay interest, the 7%, which totaled $5,075. So he has to add this, and that's going to be the total amount he now has to pay his brother back. And if you do this, you would get $19,575. Okay? So you're getting charged to borrow the money. He was being charged 7% over 5 years to borrow that money from his brother. Because if you think about it, if his brother had that money in the bank accrues interest, okay? So he was charging his brother interest because he was losing out basically by not having that money in the bank collecting interest. Okay, so you have to be very careful, especially with word problems. You have to make sure you're answering what they're asking. Sometimes they'll just say, what is the total amount he will repay? And that would have been the $19,575. Sometimes they're going to say, okay, well, what was the interest that they paid? Or what was the rate? So it's extremely important that you are paying attention to the question being asked. All right, let's do one more example. Okay, let's look at this example. It says Isaiah invested $3,500 in a mutual fund at a yearly rate of 6%. He earned $945 in interest. For how long was the money invested? Okay, so here they're asking for how long it was invested. That's the time part of it. So that's the T in our formula here. So this is where we need to rearrange the formula so T is by itself because we need to solve for T, for the amount of time. So in order to get T by itself, I need to get rid of that P and that R. So because this here is multiplying, the opposite of multiplication is division. So I'm going to divide both sides by PR. The P's and the R's cancel on the right side. I'm now left with T is equal to the interest over the principal times the rate. Okay, so now you're only going to be looking at this formula because we rearranged it in order to be able to solve the problem. So now you have to look at the problem and know what all of this represents. He invested $3,500. Well, is that the interest, the principal, or the rate? So remember on that first screen in the video, you either borrow or you invest. That's the principal amount. Right, so here, if I rewrite, T is equal to, the principal I know is $3,500. What other information? They said it was at a yearly rate of 6%. Remember, we want percent in decimal form. 6% is equivalent to 0.06, and that's the rate. So 0.06 goes in for the R because that's the rate. And it says he earned $945 in interest. So the interest amount that he earned was $945. Now, all you need to do is solve this, and that will tell you for how long it was invested for. So you're going to want to multiply down here first, the 3,500 times the 0.06, okay? and get that amount. All right, so if you do that calculation, and this is where you should be using a calculator because you don't want to make a silly mistake just with a calculation error. So I'm dropping down the 945, and then you're doing 3,500 times 0.06, and that gives you 210. And then you're going to do this final calculation. You're going to do 945 divided by 210. And that's going to give you the time period. And you get 4.5, which is equivalent to 4.5 years. Okay? So 4.5 years. Okay? So remember, knowing what they're asking is the most important thing, because then you need to rearrange your formula for your missing piece. The part that you're solving for, the variable that you're solving for, you want for that to be by itself. Okay? I hope this was helpful, and I will talk to you guys soon.